The story starts with Greg, who is laughing so hard that he almost faints. This man has been identified as a convicted felon who has served stints in jail. He was shown some of the biggest catastrophes in the world, but all he could do was laugh. The scene shows Steve coming back to the facility from his private plane. Jeff, another inmate, wakes up, and he's taken somewhere with a blindfold on his eyes. He is accompanied by armed guards and Steve, observing his every behavior. After that, Jeff gets back in the facility, and we see him talking to a female prisoner named Liz. It is revealed that both of them have different sentences. Jeff has flashbacks of the previous trip, where he is looking at the world in some very weird way. As he was influenced by administered substances, he looks at simple things like a factory and sees it as a beautiful place. He recalls a memory when he used to live a simple life and enjoy parties. One day, he was driving the car so fast that he got into an accident. The next day, Jeff is sitting for an interview, and shortly a woman named Heather arrives and sits in front of him. Some questions are being asked to them by Steve. Jeff rated the women about 8 in her attractiveness score. However, Heather only gave him less than 5. Suddenly, they both started to feel something intense for each other. It looked like the substance they were given was working for them. They immediately have sex with each other, which lasts quite a while. Eventually, the effects of the substance wears off and they are back to normal. Steve wants to see if the love really lasts. All they have to do is take a closer look at them to see if they still feel the same way toward each other during lunchtime. Jeff and Heather see each other, but he does not seem interested in her. Next day, an older woman named Sarah was sitting with Jeff in the same interview room. They both acknowledged the process to begin. Later, we can see Mark refilling his substances. He also suggests he not let others touch his back, and the same applies for him. Next session, while an experiment is going on, Jeff sits in with Steve at the control room, who asks him if he should give Dark and Phlox to one of the women he had sex with earlier. He neither chooses from Heather nor Sarah. The substance is revealed to be N40, which Steve claims could change the world. The effect will make people feel love before Jeff walks away. Steve comes back to him and asks what he really wants. Jeff once again had a flashback of the accident where his friend died on the spot. He wanted to go back and fix it if he had one wish. Later, we can see all the people eating, playing games, and having fun. Jeff is called by the guards, and so he can make a phone call, in which he gets a voicemail from someone he knows. His father on the line says this is his last voicemail. Later, he celebrates an early Christmas with his Lizzie. The next interview session had Jeff sitting with a big man. They were just sitting face to face and not doing anything for a while. On another sit-in with Steve, Jeff realized that Heather was being asked the same question that he had been asked previously. He got angry about it, which began an argument with Steve, which resulted in the scientists reminding him how great their lives are as compared to prisons. Jeff apologized to him and agreed with the process. At night, Steve is dancing around and looking shocked. He took the full dose of the N40 drug himself. He later explains to Lizzie in her interview about this dark and flocked substance, which is worse than being on fire itself. Steven tells his assistant, Mark, to inject him with a double dose of one of the substances. Mark hesitantly told him to be careful of the high dosage. Suddenly Jeff arrived, which annoyed Steve, who was currently sitting in again. Steve asked Jeff if he wanted to let them give Heather Dark and Phlox, and he said he didn't feel anything for her, so they released a little bit of the drugs to Heather. She started going crazy with some internal emotional torment, as if she were going through some kind of withdrawal. As Steve increased the dosage, this resulted in her killing herself in the process, which was shockingly witnessed by Jeff. As Steve runs into the interview room, Jeff quickly takes advantage of it and looks at Steve's book. He finds out that this whole firm is owned by Steve, and he is experimenting with all types of drugs one by one. He was going to test several of them so Steve's pharmaceutical company could release them. Jeff was able to put back the book in time before Steve arrived back. Steve instructed them to clean up Heather's death and not to tell anyone about it, otherwise, the government is going to shut down the facility. As Jeff was upset about the incident, Steve explained to him how they were doing all this for humanity. Later on, they drank together, both laughing about their funny experiences. The laughing substance the next day, Dark and Phlox, was given to Lizzie as well, which made her scared of a stapler. Steve seemed to be enjoying this session, as he knows Jeff and Lizzie are becoming closer to each other. Jeff's flashback revealed that there's another person inside the car. Her girlfriend is sitting at the back, which reveals that he actually killed 2 people while he was drunk driving. Lizzie witnessed him and could feel his pain as she hugged him. In the end, she kisses him. Jeff seems to be falling in love with her. Steve is taking a closer look at this development and giving himself a big dose of love substance. On the next sit-in session, Steve reveals to Jeff that darkened flocks are going to be given to Lizzie again today. Jeff immediately says no, which prompts Steve to get angry as he tells Jeff to come back in the morning to start fresh later when Mark is doing a refill on him. Jeff locks the door and asks about the red substance given to all of them. Mark's revealed all the truth he knew about Steve. The only thing Steve cared about was one drug called V6, the red one. Next morning, Steve was getting ready for Jeff to decide whether to give these drugs and flocks or not. He gave the control to Jeff so that he could release Lizzie the substance himself. Jeff refused it, which made Steve lash out about it. Lizzie, it was finally revealed that he lied to Jeff about her past. She didn't rob a bank. Her baby died inside her own car long ago for her negligence. She went to work for 3 hours and left her baby inside the car, which resulted in her baby's death. Hearing this, Jeff released the substance, but revealed that he released it in Steve's secretly changed chemicals with darkened flocks, which made him feel tons of pain. The substance name would have been OBS, suggesting obedience. Jeff tried to control him to open the front door, but Steve had a knife in his hands. The fight ensues as Steve releases all the vials of darkened flocks into Lizzie, as Lizzie is about to take her own life. Jeff frees himself from Steve, breaks his vial system, and saves Lizzie from her death. He tells her that he loves her as they run. Steve announced to all inmates on the intercom to go after Jeff and Liz. As Steve himself tried to fix his vial system, all the inmates were chasing after Jess and Liz. Steve fled from the scene as he rode on his plane while flying. Steve was feeling all of the substances. He felt happy, sad, and terrible all at the same time. The love potion shows its effects, and Steve could not look away from the beautiful view of the mountain as his plane crashed into it, escaping from the island through the boat they stole, and laughed about it.